Good morning, afternoon, or evening, I guess. For me, morning. Anyway, episode 29. This is the exciting episode. You know why it's the exciting episode? Because I get the opportunity to mock up the engine. I love this phase of the game every time. Every time. I get to mock the engine into the chassis. So, again, from prior videos, 1953 331 HEMI engine. For those of you that have seen that engine in real life, it's a monster. It's a huge, wide engine. You take the cylinder heads off, and you've got the block. You could set up next to a small block Chevy. She looks about the same. But you put the cylinder heads on, and you need to set it next to a big block Chevy, and she's probably a little bigger. It's a monster, but it looks really cool. So here I'm putting it in and showing you some of the challenges and some of the techniques that I'm taking to mitigate those challenges. So this is a good one. Take a look at it. Share this video, please, and send me some comments. Let me know what you're thinking. Have a great one and enjoy the video. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Time for that right now. I don't know if I'd call it a celebration, but there's the engine setting in the chassis. She is a monster. Huge. Just huge. Firewall right there. He comes up and over and he clears the dipstick. The tube does not run right along with the tranny because those, it is right behind the head. Relatively speaking, I suppose, less than 2 finger widths. But he does land. I don't know if you can see that mark behind there. I might be able to go just a skosh more back, which I'd like to because the frame gets wider back and my header clearance is not exactly as much as I'd like. I mean, there's a little more here because the engine's still, sitting on the lift and all. But I want to start fabbing the mounts up, and then I got this. So I'm going to have to take this off. And if you remember back in the videos, if you've been watching, I made this piece, but I only made one because I knew I would have to make, whether it be the top or the bottom, I'd have to make a rounded piece. And, that was all great, wonderful, that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, it does need to go to the bottom. But why the hell didn't I drill the holes? Guy gets too excited. But I did not drill the holes in the bottom. So I need to transfer that from the top to the bottom. And, of course, make the top piece. Interestingly is the transmission tunnel that I didn't think I would need much of a transmission tunnel. But, hey, just lower the engine. I got plenty of space between the what will be the harmonic balancer and the lower crossmember. That crossmember swings pretty low. Some thought that went into that, though. That crossmember is only 1/2 of an inch lower than the bottom of the frame, which I'd rather hit the crossmember than the frickin' oil pan or the trans pan. So, I mean, everything here, 1/2 an inch, probably less. It almost sits flat. It isn't even 1/2 of an inch lower because I set this thing on the ground. And so now I've got the frame on jack stands. The frame is actually sitting 4.25 inches higher than actual ride height. So ride height's 8. What is the ride height? Ride height is ride height is 8 3/8 at the front, 9 7/16 at the back. So a little bit of rake. Now I put the rake in it, but I did not go down to 8 3/8. I'm at 12 and something. 12 and well, I'm 4 1/4 inches higher. So 8 3/8 plus a quarter is 5/8. 12 and 5/8 at the front of the frame, right there. 12 and 5/8 running a straight edge out. So at this point, I said that setup is so that I can level the engine and all that kind of goofy stuff. But now I got to take that off, drill those holes, move that guy to the bottom, and the crazy thing is I got to build a tranny tunnel. I'm not going to drop the engine lower, and the reason why I'm not going to drop the engine lower is because if you look at the cross member and the pan, and then the trans pan, which I blocked up and measured up, the actual trans pan is slightly lower. See the bell housing? About 3/4 of an inch, which is about the depth of the engine. And then you get over to the cross member. So I'm slightly higher than the cross member right now. I didn't actually physically measure it yet, but I don't need to go any lower. For me to grab, let's just say 3/4 of an inch, because you can see 2 pieces of 3/4 stock in there, gets me so close to here that then I start to, I can come in and high cut this and put a half round and start clearing the header and all that. But what's the point for 3/4 of an inch? I'm not racing it. So what I'd like to do is actually get the engine maybe slightly back. If I run a line from here, I'm going to try to get straight up to here, I've got some distance that I can go before this is hitting the firewall. So if I can get the engine back, I do gain a little more clearance. If I can get that 3/4 out, maybe. But no matter what I do at this point in the game, I have to build a trans tunnel. Now, it's not that I didn't think that I would have to. It's just that now I have to do it. You can see this here. This opening here is for that there. And even that may need to be modified for a little more, all depending on how the drive shaft and the rear end setup goes. None of that bothers me. It's just the nature of the beast when you get into these projects is, where does everything land? The only thing that really, really bothers me right now is why the hell didn't I drill out those holes? Because now I'm all mocked up. That was so stupid. I should have done that. But anyway, at this point now I'll unbolt that pan, flip it over, clamp it on, mark the holes, and start drilling those holes so that I can continue. If I can go back a little farther and I can gain that 3/4 of an inch, then I will do that. Otherwise, this is where she sits. In fact, I know right now that the pan is 1.5, is pretty close, because I measured the height of that dolly that the pan is on, is at the height of that cross member. It might be, give or take 1/4 of an inch, but I'll double check everything, but if I can go back a little bit more and maybe get a piece of 1/2 inch plywood and drop it down so it's the same height as the cross member. But I want the cross member to be the first thing that touches anything that I may run into. Now, this whole thing goes down 4 inches. That's a third or a fourth. It's 12 inches right now, 12 and something right now, 12 and a half, I believe, right now. But when that goes down, where was I going with that? When that goes down, the cross member is going to be, come on, Freddie. It's 9 1/4 plus 1 1/2, 9 3/4, 10 3/4. Right now, -4, 6 3/4. So that's going to be about 6 3/4 off the ground. Not horrible for cruising, but I don't want the pan lower than that. I don't know. I won't make the pan. I assure you that pan will not be lower than that cross member. The lowest point on the drivetrain will not be lower than that. So there you have it. That's what we got going. And I'm not going to cut out the frame, but I believe I can go about 1 inch farther back, and this frame does widen as it goes back. So you're not going to give me a bunch, but I'm working on, I'm fine-tuning to the point that I'm going to be able to eventually weld the front mounts up. I am using the Speedway mounts. I think I've showed you that. I've got one kind of mocked into there right now. I had to take those off and radius them because the header was hitting it originally. So I got it mocked up. I got it ready to make it right, and those are my intentions. So that's what we have going today. Hello there. So what I have going on here now, chain's loose, engine is blocked up down here under the pan. I'm working on the engine mount. So this is your typical Speedway mount setup. Rubber bushing. You see the bushing goes through. A 1 inch hole. You got kind of a cupped disc. This allows that to move around. It crushes it. It looks like about 1/4 inch from the edge of the disc to the shelf. There's an embedded steel ring in here. And in this case, I did very careful measurements to center the engine, made each one of these identical. And what I'll have to do is bolt it up tight. I'm going to go around to the other side of the car. To bolt it up tight to the block. These are nylock nuts, so I'm going to grab some other nuts, but I mean, bolt it up tight, tack him on, and then I'll have the back done, or the front done. Excuse me, it's welding. So I fab those two up. I'll have to clean off the primer off of there to get those welded on. And keep going with that. Right now, you can see, I think I'm going to flip this here. Oh. It looks like I could just go up a little bit on the back, or even down on the front. I am gonna take a piece of half round, probably 3 inch, and just come in here a little bit, just so I have 1/2 inch or so clearance. And then I've got this blocked on a wheel deal so I can adjust the drive shaft or the transmission to the center. So I'll get that fixed on the center before I tack those up, of course, but I want to get everything mocked up. So it's coming along, it's looking good, and we will have the engine in the chassis soon. Hello everybody. I think in the last video, I don't recall, but I left you with the engine mounts were tacked in. Header clearance. I want a clearance. It's a 5/8 loop around each side header. You can see on this side there's a little bit of a gap, but the header isn't totally tight, so that'll clock just a little bit. And you know, I should put it on, but what I'm going to do is give myself plenty of room. So that is just me taking a protractor and scribing that distance around the outside of that header on both sides. Now, but I'm going to make them symmetrical, but basically probably a piece of 3-inch tubing cut at a, from a side profile, cut at a triangle and sliding down in there to follow the angle of the header. Okay. So I've marked it all the way around, and that winds up being a step to take after the engine comes out. I started fabbing up the transmission cross member. There'll be 6 bolts, 3 on each side. The bottom bolts will be buried inside of the cross member tube. So these will be nutted. Weld nuts will be on these. Welded nuts will be on these, but I can't drill into the frame because the transmission's in the way. So I'm trying to get as many things mocked as I can before I go in and yank the engine out. So then I'll come back and do that. I won't build the mount out, but basically, the mount to the transmission, I can't find the tube. But basically I'm using a piece of 2-inch, or pardon me, 1.5-inch, 1/4-inch wall tubing to go straight across there. And why I've lost it. Oh, it's right there. That'll go across, and then off of here will be the mount for the transmission, or will be the pad for the mount. And this is backwards, of course, because the X-frame tapers in. So that'll be welded on. The bottom bolts will bolt into there, so the weld nuts favors this side, so that when you put a bolt in, you won't impact that side. So basically what will happen is I'll drill and bolt those in. I've got them identified, marked, distanced, and then this piece will slide into there. I'll tack him on all the way around, Probably won't finish weld it until I bolt everything in, just in case. And then once it's in, I'll fab up the pad, tack him all over that, pull the whole shit and mess off, and finish weld it. Okay, and then at that juncture, this should be completely in. Don't know if I'm going to finish weld these. Probably not until my last set. So I don't know. Those are right, I guess. I've centered that up. I've placed those there. I'm making those cuts so the engine isn't going to go front or back. So the reality is that I'll probably finish weld those out when I weld those in, because I got a shitload of clearance, you know. So after I weld them in, so that's the next step. I took the opportunity to kind of measure everything out. You know, I measured the distance across the tops of the valve covers from that corner to that corner. Put them up there. You know, found the center line on here. Of course, it's rough, but I mean, as that comes down, you know, my valve cover is going to probably encroach beyond the hood on either side. The distance from there to where the chassis mounts is 9¼ inches, or 9 inches. The distance from the bell housing to the chassis at the firewall is 9¼ inches. So it would appear, for all practical purposes, some shaving of that, or maybe just removing that bottom ribbon. Obviously I'll trial it, but it looks like I've got the engine certainly low enough in the chassis to where it's not going to be as dramatic on the bell housing. Obviously with this, she steps down pretty good here, a few inches back. So I'm thinking that's going to work out okay. The dipstick, jury's out, because that kicks up, and the dipstick kicks up. I could measure it, but more than likely I'll have to do a relief in the firewall for that as well. So more on that later. You can see the dipstick is just inside of the corner, so he's probably going to sit about where that hole is right there. I think that's about it for now. Just sitting here trying to do a little bit of planning. But the next phase, of course, then is to pull the engine out. Just to recap, pull the engine out, put on the header relief onto the frame, weld those on, probably finish weld those, jury's out on that, tack up the cross member with the weld nuts bolted on. Yeah, tack the tube on, bolt on the end pieces after I drill the holes, and then come back and place the engine back in and finish the cross member pad on the for the transmission mount, and then come back and then hopefully drop the body down. Oh, last thing, between the top of the engine, I've got plenty of space. So many thoughts, but because of the space that I have here, the location of the exhaust winds up being perfect. You can see the cutout, so that exhaust will sit in right in here, basically on the center line of this opening. But I will not get any brake master cylinder or anything down in there. It just isn't going to work. I can't put it back in here because my mufflers are going in there. So, and I did get those tube mufflers, but if it's too loud, I want to get wider canisters. So I'm not gonna encroach on that. So it would appear that the booster is going to wind up being on the firewall. And in what configuration, I don't know. Probably straight out. The crappy thing in my head is the fact that the brake lines are going to have to run, in, come down the firewall and all that stuff. They look so goofy. Maybe I can run them back inside of the cab. I don't know. I just want it very, very clean when I'm done. So and then a guy just thinks about the battery. I mean, there's not a hell of a lot of room in here. Later. Here we are again. A new day and a short one at that. Got to get ready to get in. It's almost 6:45. I got a few things I need to clean up here, but got the engine out. Took some 3-inch tube, cut it on the seam, made 2 halves. Looking down on that, this will go in at that angle. Right there. And cover the headers, the header tubes, or clear the header tubes. The engine mount's still tacked in. Welded the nuts on, ran the bolts through on the cross member mounts, and tack welded that on. Not a whole heck of a lot, but at this point, you know, this is the detail stuff, but it's making progress. Yesterday, truck came. That's the pumpkin for the 9-inch, the axles, the center section, and another box. Don't know. But I know that I'm waiting on the forward links. There's the link bracket for the housing for the top axle side of the links, but I'm waiting for the chassis side, the front links for the 4-bar. So more on that later. But stuff is coming in. I don't know if I showed you the rotors also came in. That's like 2 days ago for the front. Thanks, folks.